Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard-to-explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Carrie Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
And Carrie,
Yeah.
you're going to introduce Ian, but
Yes.
let me just ask, first of all, if anybody's ever told you that it looks like Woody Harrelson stole your smile.
Yes. I get Woody Harrelson a lot. It's got
Wow.
this, and then if I have less beard, my jaw is more kind of pointy, and so I look even more like him. Yes.
That's funny. That's
Short
really
answer
funny.
is yes. I get Woody Harrelson a lot.
Okay.
That's funny. I did not know that about you. Well, I am really excited to have you on the podcast today because you and I are dear friends. We have known each other since, oh my gosh, how long? 2010, maybe even before then.
Probably.
And we have just had so many amazing conversations together. We have been through deconstruction together at different times, but we have been through the painful process of deconstructing our faith at different
And
times.
honestly, still a
Still
little
going.
more. I mean, I'm still going.
Yeah, still going, as we all are, I think. And I am just excited to have you all the way here from Brazil, where I miss you. You need to get your butt back here so we can have dinner together. But
Or you can come to Brazil. You can come to Rio.
Yes, that's true.
We have
That's
some
true.
Now
pretty
we're
good
talking.
restaurants here.
That's true. That's true. I agree. I would love to go to Brazil. Well, anyway, Ian Mitchell Dyer, we are so excited to have you. You are a coach specializing in helping LGBTQ community members to kind of transition, find their spot, their space in life when they are probably in the process of coming out or trying to reconcile with their faith, struggle with faith issues that have maybe made them feel less than. I know that you have been through that, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited to have you share your story because it's a powerful story. Is it okay if I tell how we met?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
And
so-
let me just say, I'm excited to be here and also excited to share, everything I can of my story to help someone else, not to possibly go through all of the painful part. I mean, it's painful anyway. It's going to be painful. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be difficult. But if my story helps somebody know that they're not alone and that they can make it to the other side, then let's go.
Yeah, it's such a powerful story. So Ian and I met when we were both on staff at a large evangelical church just outside of New York City. It could easily be considered a mega church. And I was just the puny community involvement coordinator. But Ian was he was the worship director there. He was leading up an absolutely amazing program of music, very high production value. In fact, should I mention the YouTube? It's one of my favorite performances that you ever did. The cover that you did of that song that has like 50,000 million views. Yes. It's ridiculous how many that views that got. So he had this very high profile position in that church, but the whole time was not living truthfully to himself. So why don't you talk a little bit about that part, Ian?
Yeah. That's probably one of the most painful part of my journey and my story is that for reasons of my religious background, my upbringing, the denomination I was raised in. And I honestly don't really even fault, my family or my church or my leadership at the time, because I feel like they did the best they could with what they knew, with what they had. But because of all of that, I made choices that were choices that I thought they were the only option I had. I thought it
Mhm.
was the only thing I could do, what I was supposed to do next. But all this time, from a child, I knew who I really was. I knew how I really felt. I knew that at some point I was going to have to reconcile all of this that was inside of me, bubbling just below the surface, I might say, always, all the time.
Mhm.
I'm dealing with this. Um,
So to be
and so,
clear, you
yeah,
were you were married at the time to a woman, right? So you were a beautiful woman. You were married, have raised a family with her, and both of you were
yes,
performing as the worship leaders for this large
yes,
church. Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
And yeah, and you're right. A beautiful, amazing, talented woman. If I was going to be with a woman, she's the
She'd
one I
be
would be
it.
with. I would
Mhm.
still be with her.
Mhm.
It is not about that.
Right.
Um, and I know that's a whole other thing, but I know it's easy for the people involved to feel like it is about them when actually it's just not. It's anyway. So yeah, I made the decision to attend what in my denomination was called Bible college. It's like
Mhm.
seminary, to get a theology degree. Of course, I was very involved in the music program at the Bible college, and started my journey of ministry. And I was a youth pastor first in Houston, Texas, at another what we would probably call a mega church. Now it was a mega church within that denomination, and I kind of joke sometimes that it was like the Vatican of
Mm.
the organization I grew up in.
Mhm.
The pastor there was very highly regarded, and just anyway through a series of connections, I was the youth pastor there for 3.5 years, and then a friend of mine back in Ohio, where I was raised, called me and was asking if I knew of anyone who was a music guy, creative guy that wanted to come partner with him. He was going to start a church in the Columbus, Ohio area, which is where I'm from. I'm from outside Columbus, and I again a lot of backstory, but I was like burnt out because I was the music person at this church had left, and so they're like, oh, so why don't you just kind of fill in for a little while until we find somebody? Well, 2 years later, we still didn't find somebody. So I was doing full time youth ministry and full time music creative at a
Mhm.
large church that could afford multiple staff in these areas. And I would just burn out. So I told
Mhm.
my friend, how about me? So with Trish, I think 6 months pregnant, we moved from Houston, Texas, back to Columbus, Ohio. And there, I was the music and kind of the partner of this guy. And we grew this little church, this little startup from like, I don't know, we think we started with 30 or 40 people. And then at its height was probably around 1,000 maybe. But
And then
just,
how did you get to New Jersey, to this mega church that was
yeah,
in New Jersey?
Okay, can we just back up a second?
yeah.
The Would you consider the Bible college experience kind of formative in some kinds of ways?
Um, Only in the extent that it kind of reiterated to me within our organization there were liberal churches and there were like really hardliner churches, and I came from kind of a more liberal side of
Okay.
our organization. And at the Bible college, it only kind of confirmed to me that this this particular organization was probably not going to be part of my future in the long term. um
I'm just curious. I'm intrigued by the whole Bible college idea because I went to University of California, right? Where in my time, there were everybody had posters of the Kama Sutra on the walls, and and Jimi Hendrix and all that kind of thing. And I remember asking another friend that Carrie knows, David Hayward, the Naked Pastor, about his college experience. And he was talking, it's more like yours. It was a Bible college. So I'm just wondering, like as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, how does that work when well, you understand where I'm going with this? Just trying to figure out what happens to your youthfulness, what happens to your curiosity in that space.
Yeah, no. The answer is no. It's not there. It's not happening. This Bible college is only to reinforce and to pile on what I would now call programming. And I won't go all the way and call it brainwashing, except that it's just misinterpretation and theology that's based on all the wrong things. So it's not a place where your mind is going to be expanded and you're going to go outside the little box or the bubble that you've been growing up in. It's not this at all. It's just to reinforce and make sure that you know all of the right things and all the right theology that line up with what you were taught growing up.
And so how do you feel about that? I mean, how did you feel and how do you feel?
Well, like I said, at the time, it confirmed to me that there were things that I just inherently already disagreed with. I already thought like, this doesn't sound right, or that's not really what the scripture is saying, or twisting this to make it be what we want it to be, or to line up with some man-made rule, so I kind of knew how I feel about it. Yeah.
Question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but while I know that you had that experience of, I don't believe in that, or I don't, that doesn't feel right. Wasn't there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there also a sense of internalizing that, so that you had to really kind of struggle with, wait, is this true about what God thinks about me? Or, that did do some kind of coding of your psyche that you really had to fight through and kind of overcome later when you were ready to live authentically.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely that. I mean, when it comes to my sexuality, when it comes to me being part of the LGBT community, that was just something I just kind of had to like put over here. I kind of just had to stuff it down and be like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know when I'm going to deal with it. I know at some point it's going to rear its ugly head, but it's like this cannot be a part of who I am. Even though I knew it was, even though I had, again, up until that point, I mean, and as soon as I knew, or as soon as I could understand, as far as what my teachers were telling me in my church and in my religion, that I was wrong and I was bad and I was sinful and I was an abomination, all of those things. As soon as I knew that, I began the cliche of pray the gay away. I did all the things. I did, like pray and fast and read the books. I didn't until some later years, confide in anyone to actually have any kind of counseling. But there was a time, even in recent years, because this is all still, for me, I call myself a gayby. As in like a baby gay. I'm like maybe 5 years old. But not until some recent years, I had some like counseling that I would probably consider borderline conversion therapy type stuff. Not some of the crazy camp things that you see on a documentary, but enough to where it wasn't helpful. It was actually more damaging. Just added to the the self-loathing and the dichotomy of trying to learn this theology and embrace it to be my life, to be my career, and at the same time warring with what's inside of me, warring with this truth that I know is there, and that I, for years, for 10 years probably, I've tried to say, God, please take this away, whatever I have to do. The fight was real.
Let me ask you this, because, and again, please, you get to control this conversation. Okay. but I know that you've said you want to be open with your story. And I think that we probably want to move to that place where it got super painful. Not that it wasn't all painful, but super painful when you finally kind of made that change where you're like, this, I can't live like this anymore. Because that's, I think, the thing that you're helping people get through now, right? Like
Exactly.
finding that courage to say, I can't live this lie anymore. And
Yes.
because that is that moment where everything feels like it's going to disintegrate around you. And it's a terrifying thing, you know?
Yeah.
So
No,
do you want to talk about that part of your life?
Yeah, for sure. So fast forward, this is 30 years and I'm rounding probably down just so I can feel like I'm younger. But fast forward 30 years and we're at this church where Carrie and I were on staff together. And I had all this 30 years, this war definitely materialized in unhealthy ways. Definitely I lived a double life for a lot of those 30 years. And by that, I mean, I'm leading worship. I'm ministering to people on the weekends, trying to be a good person. And then over here at this other side, I'm in unhealthy ways fulfilling this real and natural for me. Now I know natural for me need that I had that just wasn't being fulfilled. There was no other way. It's just, it's just how I dealt with it. But fast forward to this moment, and I had reached a point where I had I'll call it a short relationship with someone while I was married, and I broke it off because, again, this war, this struggle. I'm like, I work for a church. I'm a Christian. This can't be part of my life. So I broke it off. And this was the moment where I realized, and sorry if I get emotional. This is the moment where I realized that I would never have this. I would never be able to live and have this happiness that this relationship was bringing me. What that was filling this void, that was this, again, what felt natural for me. I was told it's unnatural and an abomination, but for me, it felt natural. When I broke this off, I had a realization that you'll never have that. That will never be part of your life. And so that kind of sent me into a little bit of a tailspin, and I kind of went into a depression. And I got to a point where I won't say I was suicidal, but I got to a point where I was like, I would rather not live than continue living my life the way I had lived it the last 35 years. And it was just because the pain of it was so deep, was so all consuming. I was, for a long time, I was able to keep it below the surface, but like this experience I had showed me what, and I don't want to say true love, but showed me what like a complete love could look like and could feel like for my life. And I say that because I don't want to take away from the relationship I had with my ex-wife, this wonderful, amazing, beautiful woman, because I love her and I still love her in so many ways. But there were just certain ways and areas of love that couldn't be fulfilled in this relationship.
And I think that, if I can interrupt real fast, you and I had many conversations, I think, that where you were struggling with not only that deep desire for that relationship that you felt like you were never going to have, but also the guilt of the pain that you were causing, right? And by coming out, right, that other people were hurt, and that the truth of that is that you were taking so much of that responsibility on yourself. But in actuality, what I used to always try to say to you is it was the fault of bad theology that you were given, because if you were given healthy holistic theology of well-being from the very beginning, you never would have made the decision to enter into a marriage with a woman, right? So
Yeah,
Okay,
now,
so
of
I
course.
want to dovetail with that when you get done with your question, because
yeah,
you're raising some big ones.
yeah, because I just think that like the theology that tells you to deny what is a natural part of you. Now, of course, people can take this and go really far on the other end of the spectrum and create lots of problems. But this theology that tells you you're bad for being gay ended up creating so much more pain that was not just for you, it was for other
Yes.
people as well, right? Because it forced you
Yes.
to enter into relationships under false pretenses, right? That
Yes. And that pain, honestly, just to be really raw about it, that pain that I've caused other people is my biggest regret. I mean, it's
yeah.
unavoidable. I can't change it. There's
Mhm.
nothing I could do to take. I've told some of these people in my life that I love that that I hurt so terribly with all of it. I've told them, if I could, with all the pain and the turmoil I've been through, if I could still take on yours, if I could,
Yeah.
I would gladly, so happily take that pain as well, just because I so much didn't want to cause pain to the people I
Right.
love.
Right.
I'm wondering, to what extent you can sense what Carrie was describing in terms of the opening up of society, the opening up of Christianity in particular, or maybe religion in general. A friend sent me a TikTok yesterday of this Oklahoma City council member addressing the state board of education on the mistreatment of LGBTQ people, and this guy was bringing it. I mean, this Okie, if you will, was behind the podium, and he was just lambasting them and bringing out the legal implications and how some people could get arrested for what they were doing. And I just thought, this is in the heartland. This is significant, indicative of some kind of change. And to what extent are you feeling that in the world?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, moments like that give me hope. Progress has been slow, but I feel like steady in a way. And then sometimes it feels like we take, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but still hopefully where there's a little bit of progress. Um, Again, I come from a denomination that's really, 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 I can't get more conservative. And not to disparage the Amish, but like almost Amish. So as conservative as you could get. I don't know if we're there yet, but like in mainstream America and like you said, in middle America and heartland, I feel like there's been some progress, and it offers. I'm hopeful. I feel like possibly even in my lifetime, we could see like some affirming evangelical, not only congregations, but prominent leaders. And I I hope and believe that I'll see it in my lifetime.
I think that's
Oh, that
already
sounds exciting.
happening. Yeah, I do think that that's already happening. The question is, are there going to be enough people who are still interested in church because there's been so much pain caused by churches, right? And in fact, it's actually one of a really big concern for a lot of pastors, because a lot of pastors whose livelihood is caught up in their churches, right?
Mhm.
And you can't deny that fact, right? But their livelihood is caught up in their churches, and it's often a decision as to whether to come out as affirming as a pastor. They will lose half of their congregation. I do believe
I
that
Absolutely.
did.
they'll build, see, exactly, they'll build it back eventually, but that's a hit, and it's a real hit, you know.
Absolutely, for sure. I can think of two off the top of my head. Stan Mitchell in
Yep.
Nashville.
Hmm.
I believe Grace Point Church. I know he faced this. He's a good friend of mine. And then also, what is it? Oh, there's a church that I attended a little while in Manhattan called The River. And the pastor, same thing. He really grappled and struggled with and came to an affirming theology, and he lost the majority of his congregation. Now again, he's slowly building it back, but yeah, it's I think that's the way it's going to happen. I think it's going to be, they're going to lose a pastor or they're going to lose the congregation. They're going to go
Earlier, you mentioned that, that if you could carry the pain of people that you did not necessarily cause it, but you passed it on, where, this anguish. I have a dear friend who had a similar experience and now has a male partner, and his ex-wife became even more conservative after their separation.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about that kind of thing.
You mean in my own personal journey?
Yeah.
First, let me clarify something we were saying earlier that's related, where we talked about if I hadn't been taught this bad theology, I wouldn't have made the choices I made. Correct. Yes. But at the same time, I have to believe that there was and is a divine plan, because if I hadn't made those choices, I have two amazing sons, and that they wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have my boys. And so how can I call that a mistake? How can I call that a wrong decision? So it's such a I don't know, quandary, because yes, on one hand, I wish I could have made a different decision so that everybody didn't have to go through the pain. But on the other hand, would I go back and make the same decision? Because I have two beautiful sons from this marriage or from this relationship. So there's a reason. I know there's a reason, and it probably has to do with their lives, a whole lot more than my life. There's a plan of whatever they're accomplishing, and they're both doing so good. They're both, being successful. My youngest had, a few years that he really struggled, but he just got an internship at one of the most prominent recording studios in Manhattan, and so excited for him. But he's finishing his degree in music, and just really proud of them. And so the question back to my ex, and this is a touchy subject because we don't have a great relationship. We don't really communicate much outside of when it's necessary for some reason. I wish that could be different, but I also know that healing takes time. And I hope and pray that, again, there'll be a time in the future when we can be friends again. And she definitely has strong beliefs in this area. She believes the theology that we were taught. And so therefore, even just saying, let's agree to disagree isn't enough. And it's kind of just I'm going to live my life this way and you're going to live your life this way, and we'll connect whenever we need to. But I'm really, honestly, truly, deep from my heart, hoping for more, and that we can somehow be this ultra blended, crazy, interwoven faith, family, gay, straight kind of thing in the future.
Yeah, that's a beautiful dream. And, it speaks to the complicated nature of being human and living in family and society. I mean, you're representing all of those things. I wonder, if there is something symbolic. You find joy in your sons, the life of your sons. Now, I wonder if that's symbolic of the reality that we all create things that we were in a place of lack of consciousness, self-recognition, and we did things, and good fruit came out of it. And sometimes we can have a tendency to look askance at everything we did. Like I was a, total jerk off. I just blew my life, when in fact there's something providential where even good things come out of our, not knowing what to do, not knowing who to be. Still good things come out of that. And I'm sure you can speak to that as much as anybody.
Oh man, absolutely. And honestly, this is something I take solace in a lot, and offer gratitude for, is that even in the middle of my mess, and my life was a freaking mess. And
this sounds like a gospel song coming on.
I said the nice word. My life was a freaking mess. But even in the middle of that, it's like so much good was happening. I mean, like in spite of myself, and so that's why I know, there's a plan. I love the word providential. I know as painful as everything was for me and for everyone else around me, I know that the way my life went, my journey, I really know in my heart that it went the way it was supposed to go.
Because what you're saying,
because of the good that happened.
I don't know if you recognize how lyrical everything you are saying right now is. And as a musician, maybe you're going to need to do something with this, because so many people
I'll listen back.
Helped. Yeah, people are going to be helped by listening to this. But I mean, if you could put that, to a tune, wow.
I can, and I'll listen back to get those lyrics.
So one topic we haven't talked about, we talked about your marriage and, that part of the painful part of your coming out and deconstruction, but we haven't talked about your family of origin much and their response, right? Especially having, and I obviously, I know, but I think that's a big pressure for a lot of the kinds of clients that you would be dealing with, right?
Absolutely.
So to know that you've been there and you've navigated those relationships and had to release some and, surrender to some of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that can get really, really painful.
I can absolutely talk about it. And you're right. Those are the three big things that the people that I get to work with, it's loving and accepting themselves. It has to start there. A lot of them have religious hangups because of bad theology, what they were taught. And then another one is family. They have unaccepting, unaffirming family that keeps them from, the fear of rejection, the fear of disappointing them, keeps them from being able to really make the leap into living a happy life, and that's what this is kind of my tagline. That's like, everyone deserves to be happy. And for you to be happy, you have to be living the things that make you happy. So how it went down with my my biological family, we moved out of our house in New Jersey, and we had decided that when we moved out, that's when, and when we say we, it was kind of an I, that was going to be a time where we were going to separate, and I was going to take some time to try to figure out all of this with the intention of possibly we would reconcile. Didn't know at the time, but we moved out of the house and immediately drove from New Jersey to Indiana, where my family lives. And we were going to tell my mother and my father, and I included my sister because she is the wife of the pastor of the church where they attend there. And I've been close to her. So we got there in the evening, and I had planned to tell them sometime the next day or whatever. And I was just so anxious and so worked up about it. I was like, hey, can you guys come over at 8:00 in the morning? I wanted them I wanted to do it right away. Well, I still had the courage, or at least to make my stomach stop hurting. So sat
Did
them
they have
down and I told,
any knowledge or understanding of the fact that you were getting that would
I
okay.
mean, I mean, if, and I don't think I've had this conversation, if they had heard any rumblings or rumors over the years about anything, they never let on.
Okay.
Um, so I think the short answer is no. But I sat them down and I said, this is the way you talk about it in the Christian evangelical world is same-sex attraction. You don't
Mm-hmm.
say I'm gay. So at
Mm-hmm.
that moment, at that time still, I said, so my whole life I've been dealing with and struggling with same-sex attraction. And talked a little bit about it and what it meant for Trisha and I, and that we were going to separate. And she actually stayed there with them, I think maybe 6 months. You know, my parents were amazing and took her in, and just she lost her mother years ago to cancer, and my mom has been like a mother to her. But so when they heard this, of course they were upset. And my father was shocked. He was just like, I had no idea. But they weren't like, you're bad, you're dirty, you're an abomination, get out, leave, don't ever come back. They were like, okay, now that we know, we can be in your corner. We can help you fight. And in that moment, I was
Meaning
like,
fight the gay away.
fight. We can fight this. We can now that we all know together, then there's just that many more that can be praying and fasting for God to take this away and to change you and believe. And in that moment, I was like, okay, and we did the circle prayer and they prayed. But I knew in my heart, I was like, I can't fight anymore. I'm like, I'm done fighting. I've fought my whole life. I've done all the things you want to do with me, all the things you want to like be in my corner. And I appreciate that kind of support. I do. I get it. And they felt like, and even still feel like that they do it out of love. And I believe they're doing it out of love. They think the best way to love me is to tell me that I'm wrong and that I need to change and that I need to come back to God, all of these things. But so they decided they were going to fight with me. And I knew that I couldn't fight anymore because I was like, I didn't have any fight left. And honestly, I got to the point where it's like, I don't feel like I need to fight this anymore. I feel like I need to figure out how to embrace it, how to
Mm-hmm.
accept it. And this is the journey now that I try to help people with, because there are so many people like me, what I've gone through, that are either in hiding or they're just living a celibate life so that they don't upset grandma, or
Mm-hmm.
they're have so much self-loathing that they can't even admit to themselves, what they know would make them happy, or they really feel like if they would accept and live as a gay person, that they would go to hell.
You know,
All of these things.
Can we? Yeah, let's talk about some of the things that the evangelical or some of these very conservative Christian traditions will tell people who, and in love, right? Meaning, so for example, the one that I'm thinking of is like, okay, well, you can be gay, you just can't act gay. Like, don't act on it. Don't be celibate then.
Yeah.
And as if that, like, first of all, I just think that demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the human need for belonging and
Yeah.
connection and intimacy, right? It's one thing if you're going to choose that and take an oath because you're going into the priesthood or something and you have the choice to choose that. But it's a whole other thing to be told by an institution that because of who you are, you have to be celibate in order to be accepted by God.
Yeah. Can I just say that to me, it's almost hypocritical, because I was talking to someone who was actually on staff with us, and we were talking about gay relationships, and they said, well, just because I see a beautiful woman walking down the street, there are many, many beautiful women. That doesn't mean I can be with all of them. And my answer was, well, you can be with one.
Right.
You can make a choice to have one. And you're telling a gay person they can't even choose to be in a monogamous, committed, loving, godly, biblical relationship. So to me, it's just like it's. I mean, I may be using hypocrisy or hypocritical out of context, but to me, it's just like
No, I think that you're right on.
you can choose someone. Why can I not choose someone?
And we can talk about
Okay.
the whole biblical view of marriage on another podcast, but because that's a whole other topic.
Okay.
But is there even one? But anyway, David, what were you going to say?
Okay, so my friend Peter Fitch, who is a professor at St. Stephen University, whom I hope we will have in May here, he wrote a book over a decade ago called Learning to Interpret Towards Love. And it ended up with him being no longer in his denomination. But one of the things that Peter envisions is that that queer folks will actually be, it might be too strong a word to say the salvation of Christianity, but will represent something of a revival, a renewal of the possibilities within Christianity. How do you see that, and how do you see that?
Wow. I mean, that's profound because, like, for me, Christianity is and should be first and foremost about love. I mean, Jesus spoke these words. He said, hang all of the law and prophets, everything they taught, everything they believed, all of these rules and regulations you have, put it all on love. Loving God first, loving God as your neighbor and as yourself. And so to me, to say for the church to embrace and to truly be godlike, to be love, is to embrace the queer community.
So just paint a picture for us of how the kind of love that you know is possible, that quality of love, how redemptive that can be and change, what we know as legacy Christianity.
Okay. So I feel like, we're even taught that all sin is sin, but within the church, at least the church I grew up in, there were levels of sin. And being gay was, if not the top, near the top. So if the church can learn to love the very worst of sinners, then I feel like it will topple down. I feel like if the church can embrace and truly love a queer person for who they are and give them full rights within the church, within religion, within God, then this is truly love. This is capital L love. And that will trickle down into every other part of the church because of the levels. If you can love the worst, then everything else I feel like will be easier and will just come with time, if that makes any sense.
What would you say to, let's say there's a person listening to this podcast and they were looking for a church to attend. Could you point out some of the advantages, if you will, of looking for, let's say, a church with queer leadership, maybe a queer pastor or at least a queer leadership team or something like that? What would be the advantages there, possible advantages?
Well, obviously relatability would be number one.
I'm sorry. This person that I'm describing who's looking for the church is not queer themselves.
Okay. Now I understand.
I left that out. Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, it's going to take a very special kind of Christian, if you will, who would actively look for and want to be part of a congregation that had any kind of queer leadership, first of all. I feel like it's more likely that it would happen from within, that like would happen, a pastor or leadership or a a church who's maybe transitioning into affirming hires a staff person, a prominent staff person who's in the queer community. And so then the congregants have to grapple with, am I going to stay? Am I going to accept this? What does this mean about everything I've always been taught and believed? Then the people who are looking for that or open for that, or maybe left the congregation because they're not affirming, I think it's going to only be more positive because they're like, oh, look, this church is what we're looking for because they're embracing, even in their leadership team, someone who we feel like we should already be loving. We should already be loving and accepting this kind of person.
Yeah, I think right now is a really good time to mention a website called Church Clarity. It's
Absolutely.
churchclarity.org, because I know that the church that you and I were a part of, Ian, definitely participated in a practice of being very non-transparent about their true beliefs around the LGBTQ community. And so they would openly profess, oh, everybody's welcome. We love everybody. Please come. Please come. But then after those people came, got involved, got invested in volunteer positions and small groups and building relationships within that church. And then they made it clear that they were gay. Then they were ASAP removed from leadership positions, removed from any kind of public position. And not only that, but they lost deep relationships. And I remember one in particular, a guy who was such a brilliant singer. And I will never forget this because he came out to our pastor. And I think he had been out previously, but he came out and Ian, I know you know who I'm talking about. He came out to our pastor. Our pastor did not respond well. And then, like within weeks, I saw this man post a video to Facebook of himself leading worship in his boyfriend's church. And he was praising God. And all I could think of was, oh my gosh, we stopped this man from doing that in our church. And which do you think, if God was going to be mad at anybody, and I don't really think that's true, but if God was going to be mad at anybody, who do you think he'd be more mad at? The people who stopped that man from praising him, that being that God, or the church that allowed that worship to happen, right? Like, it made no sense to me. It made no sense to me.
It made no sense. And I know, I know that you and I have had a lot of conversation about this. And in particular, that circumstance for me was heartbreaking because obviously I knew what was going on in my own life. And it was a good friend, somebody I felt close to. And just to see the treatment or the response or probably the disappointment, wouldn't even respond to me after that.
Right.
And I get it. I understand why. Because guilty by association. I get it.
And you weren't out at the time.
No,
right?
no. And we've just so you know, we've now since reconnected and have relationship, and we've been together. I've been to parties at their home, so thank God I was able to make that one right.
So what that experience that Carrie was describing is probably more common, that kind of thing. But I was also thinking of, all right, so there's a man in our church now, and has been for several years, who his first experience with Christianity was he went to an Episcopal church in the Bay Area, the San Francisco area, that had a gay rector. So that's how he came to his experience in Christianity. So then when he came here and he found us, it was like that was normal for him, right? I mean, and so he didn't carry that baggage. He didn't, some people, they carry baggage when they come into a community, but he didn't have that. He was traveling light. So that's why I was asking the question, if a person wants to, find a church that's led by a queer person or queer people, what can that say about their souls, their way of, moving in the world, moving in life spiritually?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, um, obviously it's a process for those of us who grew up in church and, like you said, carry this baggage, as you called it. There's a lot of baggage and a lot of unpacking, a lot of relearning, a lot of deprogramming that has to happen. But I feel like, you know, part of my hopefulness is that this younger generation doesn't carry it. They don't, just in even outside the church, when they come to a point where they're searching for God or they're searching for spirituality, and it's like this is not an issue. This is a non-issue for them. So I feel like they're at a huge advantage to where they can find a place where they can be whole, and there won't be a stigma. There won't be, I don't want to say things to disagree with, because they know that as long as there's us humans involved, we're gonna,
Right.
get things wrong
I
sometimes.
Yeah. I often wonder if I think about this a lot, especially with and this is not to say that trans people or non-binary people have never existed previously, because of course they have. They've always existed. But the ways that we are, and I think we talked about this on another podcast, the ways that we are, that as a culture, the LGBT community is being centered in ways that it's never been centered before, right? And
Mhm.
and that non-binary people specifically are challenging our preconceived notions of what is
Yes.
what is reality, right? Reality must
Yeah,
be one thing or another. It can't be this.
What is
It
humanity?
Yeah, it can't be this spectrum, right? I think I think Spirit is up to something with that. Sorry about my cat waving her tail in the video. But I think Spirit is up to that. Is up to something there, and trying to stretch us and to
Yes.
understand a new expansive reality includes the messiness of non-binary, right? That
yeah,
we can't
yeah,
categorize, right? And so
yeah.
when David was talking about, the LGBTQ community kind of redeeming church in a way, I think that in a lot of ways could be the way it does it. So
Absolutely. I love the thought of that, and um, I just, I, not a regret, but I wish I was part of this younger generation that could
mm,
grow up in this kind of a world. And
Mhm.
whereas the ultra conservative evangelical church would say, well, the world is just supposed to get worse and worse and worse, and that's why we're seeing this, and that's why we're starting to see some churches be more accepting. Carrie, I agree that I think Spirit is up to something, and that it has had to be a process. It has had to
mhm.
be, the church wasn't ready. He,
Yeah,
he had to do things in people's hearts. He had to change something over here that was seemingly unrelated, but was preparing our hearts and minds to be able to be open enough to understand that, like, this is the church, this is me, this,
right,
this is God, not this little box that you built for me. So I think
right,
little by little, God has been expanding um the church and our belief systems and our what's right and what's wrong. It's what I mean. Here's a silly example, but um, this denomination I grew up in, when I was growing up, it was a sin. I mean, sin, capital SIN, to go to the movies.
mm,
Now, as an adult,
Yeah.
to go to the movie theater, as an adult, when I would go home for Christmas, there was a one year. I don't know how it happened, but one year we went to the IMAX. It was okay as long as we went to the IMAX theater. And
mm.
then up to now, it's like they go to the movies. So it's like,
Interesting. Yeah.
what happened along the way? And I remember a conversation with one of my family members early on when what my family had come away from that denomination way long time ago. And they knew that we went to the movies, and we got into this little discussion about it. And they said, well, it's just wrong because people don't know what you're going there to see. And I said, excuse me, do you go to Blockbuster Video and rent videos
Yeah,
to watch at
right.
home? And they said, yeah. And I said, there are far worse videos you can rent at Blockbuster than I can see at the AMC theater. So that,
Yeah,
and they're like,
exactly.
well, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, exactly.
Of
You don't
course,
want it because it doesn't
It's
hold
it's
water.
like it's like, when did we decide that it was okay to wear mixed fiber clothing, right? Like, when did we
Exactly.
decide,
Oops.
that
Oops.
yeah, exactly. Like, it's just funny. So we're nearing the end of our hour together, and I want to make sure that we give people the chance to find you. So how can they connect with you? Because I know that you have so much to offer clients
Mm.
who need somebody like you, who's been there, who's been on, and has come out on the other side. You're living with your husband now, and
Mhm.
I would love to let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And and honestly, it's my dream, my passion, I feel like I've actually now found my, life calling.
Mhm.
I feel like I had a calling that was to do one thing for a while, but I feel like my whole life led me up to this point to be able to help people through the things that I
Mm.
went through. Um, so the best way to find me is Instagram and Facebook. And
Mhm.
both of those handles are not Ian, but
Mhm.
Mitchell Germano Dyer. Mitchell,
Okay.
Mitchell,
Okay.
Germano, Germano, Dyer, Dyer.
Okay,
Awesome.
do that one more time.
Mitchell Germano Dyer.
Yep. We'll get it in the show notes.
Yes.
Mitchellgermano Dyer.
Yep. Yep. We will get it in the show notes for sure.
One last thing, and if you're comfortable with this, being a person of faith, what if we close with you praying for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. And specific audience, or I'm just going to pray for whoever happens to come across this podcast. And
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
All right. Sounds great. Father, today, first, I just want to start off by saying thank you. So grateful. My heart is so full, just with this conversation and with the opportunity to share a little bit about my life and about everything that my journey entailed, and just, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. So thank you for that opportunity. And today I just want to pray for anybody who might be listening to this right now, who's struggling to love themselves, struggling to accept themselves. Maybe they were brought up in a family or in a church where who they are, no matter how pleasant or how hospitable it was phrased or worded, they still got the message that they were bad, that they were not loved, that to use a really strong word, in some cases, that they were an abomination. God, I pray for all of these people that might be listening. And God, today what I want them to know is that they are loved. They are completely and unconditionally loved. They're fully known and loved by you. You know every part of us. You know our deepest parts. And God, I just pray right now that you'll let them feel your peace. Let them feel your presence. Let them know that no matter how difficult the journey is, no matter where they are in their journey, whether they're just beginning, whether they're in the middle of it, or whether they don't even know what to do next, let them know that it's going to be okay. Let them
Yeah.
know that they can make it to the other side, that there are people who will come alongside. There are people who will hold their hand, who will put their arm around them, that will tell them that they are loved and accepted. So God, just use these words, use my story, use Carrie and David, continue to just let people know that there is more to life than just having to be miserable and keep inside all of the things that you think you have to measure up to, and that we can unpack those things, that we can give them to you, and we can find true and authentic happiness in a life through you. And I pray it in your name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. It was such
Absolutely.
a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
And I love you, my friend. I will
love you.
talk with you both soon. Thank you so
Okay.
much,
All
guys.
right.
Bye.
Ciao.
Woohoo.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at GodIsNotAnAsshole or text 805-703-8393 because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole.